Hello and welcome back to the Game Room. Well, 2022 is basically in the books, and this year, for a brief moment there, it had echoes of 2017 for me. There was banger after banger coming out, but around the middle of the summer, it started to peter out, and then in my opinion, it ended kind of with a whimper. I mean, a lot of things got delayed out that we were expecting. I also, because of monetary reasons, did not pick up a few releases that I was anticipating for various reasons. So Christmas just hit us, and I finally picked up Diofield Chronicles and the new Mario Rabbids game, which likely would be on this list, but as I didn't get a chance to play them, nor did I pick up things like Callisto Protocol, Xenoblade 3, that might have colored my end of the year a bit. But we are here to talk about my top 10 games of the year that I did play. Another one, honorary mention, that I'm going to leave off that might shock people is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. I played it for maybe 10 minutes and never picked it up again. And I don't know why. It just, I don't know what it was. For some reason, it was great, played great. I just didn't have anyone else to play with, wasn't really feeling it, came out at a weird time. I wanted to wait for the physical edition. I think I got the digital, I don't know. Anyways, let's get to the list. So number 10 is actually the first game in this series that I've played since the original back in the 90s. I've really never been drawn to play a new game in this series, but now it's just kind of like, you know what, let's see what all the kids are talking about. And that is number 10, Pokemon Violet. Now this is the double pack, Violet and Scarlet. And one of the funny things about it is I haven't played Pokemon in so long, but with the whole added glut of the way modern games work nowadays, I remember starting Pokemon Blue back in the day. You get the choice of 3 Pokemon and then you're out in the world. This whole setup is still the same in Violet, but now they have all this backstory. You meet your mom, you create your character, you meet your rival, who's really your friend or your enemy or your frenemy, I don't know. And then you pick a Pokemon, but then you get a little bit of chance to work with all 3 of them before you pick the one you want. And what took 5 minutes in the original took close to an hour to an hour and a half in the new one. And if that's not emblematic of why I get tired with modern game design, I don't know what is. But played about 6 or 7 hours of it, enough to have it on the list. It's thoroughly enjoyable. I don't have that same drive to catch them all, but it is hard. You know, you get in there and you're like, oh, I can get these and I collect this. And they've added a nice implementation where you can have your Pokemon go off and fight for you without being in the battle, so really it mitigates the grinding. But as that's kind of what I'm into in these sort of games. I don't know if the window dressing and the mission structure and all the other stuff is really going to hook me. I don't know. It's a good game to play when I'm, going to bed and need to settle the dogs down, the babies, up and down. I don't know. It's good for that. But yeah, number 10, Pokemon Violet for me. Number 9 is likely one of my biggest disappointments as far as what I was expecting. The first game, when it came out in 2017, was one of the best PS4 exclusives I had played at the time. Probably still up there with some of my favorite PS4 games. Well, the sequel, Horizon Forbidden West, really for me left a lot to be desired. I don't know why, I just couldn't get into it as much. Now, the first game kind of bored me with the endless chat trees and setting up the world that I couldn't care less for, except for Aloy and her story. In this game, they somehow make Aloy very annoying. For most of the game, they introduce new features, but in ways that just feel like a step back. That's the only way I can put it. It just feels like I don't know if maybe the luster of the first game wore off now that I played so many more of these open world style games in the last 5 or 6 years, but it just did not hook me the way the first one did. The way you traveled basically to the West Coast and Vegas, but the world still felt so small. I guess because I'm from the West Coast, I know the distance better than in the first game where it took place on the East Coast. And then the fact that there wasn't the same, like, it got good once you got your home base, but before then it seemed so aimless. And really, it didn't have that same hook the first game had where you felt the progress as you were going. Once you unlock Gaia and once you start collecting all the different robots, but they jumped the shark so completely with having these future people come down, and then you have, are they your friends? Are they backstabbing you? The ultimate enemy ends up being somebody that you weren't expecting. They have a great villain they set up at the beginning that kind of peters out and does nothing towards the end. And it just seemed like there was too much in it. And we'll get to a similar feeling I have with another game later on this list. It's still higher up, but yeah, that's my number 9. Number 8. Well, when I got my PS5 back in March, I was on the lookout for some cheap games to play, as it is that $70 price tag, which makes it hard to justify buying new games. Well, a game that had just came out that I didn't play the first one, but I heard good things about it. And the sequel had a crazy discount, I want to say on Walmart or something like that, when I still had Walmart Plus, because I used that to get the PS5, was Dying Light 2. Very fun game. A lot of problems with it. It has a bunch of DLC I don't care about. Season passes crap I don't care about. But the actual combat, the feel, the ability to just wreak havoc on enemies, thoroughly enjoyed it. The story-wise, once again, I've been playing these type of games so long, it more was a hindrance on my enjoyment than actually enhancing it. But the actual process of playing it, the abilities, the way it felt while you were doing it, it really felt like an evolution of that Assassin's Creed free running, but you had it in first person, you could really traverse everywhere, and just the jib physics of destroying enemies never got old. You know, hitting a zombie and just obliterating them always puts a smile on my face, and I don't know, that might tell you more about me and less about the game. But enough of that one. Let's move on to my number 7, which frankly, I'm shocked that this game was so highly lauded as it was, because I played it maybe 2 months after the game came out, and I waited for the physical release, and I enjoyed it, and I have 6 cats, so come on, if this is for anyone, it's for me, and that's Stray. I don't know what it was. I don't know. Like, the first thing that rubbed me the wrong way is I really would have thought they would have given you a custom cat option. Like, you can change. No, you're always the same orange cat, which really, with customization the way it is, you know, maybe I'm being too harsh on it. But it's fun and all. The story is interesting and all. But really, it's a short game, which I don't fault it for. I like short games. Don't get me wrong. They are nice, especially when you don't have as much time. But there just wasn't as much gameplay to it as there was cuteness and sort of, real life cat behavior. It was more of, maybe because I wasn't on the right substances when I was playing it, but I was looking for something a little bit more intensive, a little bit more, and that's kind of based on, like I said, the front half of this year had some bangers, some really thought-provoking, intense games. Stray is definitely something, at least, you have to be in the right mindset to really be into it. And I went into it after a lull of, I think, a few months. Like, this was after I had played Live Alive, as far as new games come. So the follow-up to this, I felt it a little lackluster. And still a fun game, though. Still really cool. The great, like, you play as a cat. It's fun. It's cute and all, but it's Game of the Year, not at all. Like, that is a pure popularity contest, in my opinion. Moving on to number 6. So this was a game that I was hyped for. I have never picked up one of these series games on release before this one, and that is the illustrious Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Forgotten Land, which really to me is basically finally the Mario 64, Mario Odyssey treatment for Kirby. I didn't play the Kirby game on the N64, but all the other Kirby games that come out, Kirby Star Allies, Kirby Epic Yarn, a lot of them have been 2D based. This one really felt like more of a, if anything, it's more like Mario 3D World, because it's very contained levels. You can't go everywhere, but it's a smart concept. It's fun. It overstays its welcome a little bit. There is a hidden boss at the end of the game that can be a little irritating to unlock. The final worlds kind of drag on a bit, because you have to, any game that makes you find collectibles to progress through the story, at a certain point, if that collectible task is actually blocking you from progressing, it really starts to piss me off after a while. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think some of the newer 2D Mario games start to wear on me, where it's like, I don't want to go through these old levels looking for stars. I don't want to go. Anyway, like I said, I'm an old fogey with this. When I beat the level, I want the level to be done. If I enjoyed the game so much to go back and get the secrets, or if there's a secret path that I'm locked out of but it doesn't prevent me from experiencing the game, I don't mind that, because I enjoy going back to find secrets if they amount to something, not if it's just, oh, you can find it to then get to the next level that you would have gotten to anyways. Still enjoyed it. Thoroughly fun game. First Kirby game I ever picked up at launch, and really a great way to start the year. I think that was a March release. So yeah, like I said, February, March, April, that time zone. I was expecting this to be a monster year, but then it kind of petered out. But number 5 is a game that's from a studio called Supermassive Games. It is the Quarry, the follow-up to Man of Medan and Until Dawn. Really more in a follow-up to Until Dawn, which was the game I liked that was a slasher movie turned into a supernatural horror movie. This one, once again, is full-on supernatural horror. Really enjoyed it. Thing I was saying, I just reviewed this last week. I want to say this was a very recent review. Picked it up for $20 on one of the various sales. Well worth it. Well worth it. Again, great value for your money. Tons of replayability, but not something that, in my opinion, you can replay without having someone else in the room or someone else to experience the story, or if you're a streamer, if you have people watching you do it. I would imagine it's much more enjoyable for that, but if it's just you sitting in there with your cat, especially the way I messed up where I didn't take the shot sometimes, because it really messes with you in the they give these little tutorials where it shows you, oh, sometimes it's better off not to take the shot, and I took that to heart, and it ended up getting 3 people killed that I liked. Another guy died on just a rare fluke, but still highly enjoyable, and something that is, I love these guys. I can't wait to see what next they do. They've done werewolves. They did the ones in the first. Maybe they'll do vampires next. That'd be cool. All right, moving on to the next one. Now, this game here, I expected going into this year to be my game of the year. No holds bar. I thought there is no way. It was coming out in March. I was so stoked. I believe it came out on the 4th year, or whatever, the 5th year anniversary of the Switch, March 3rd, I think. And that is Triangle Strategy. Kind of a spiritual successor to Final Fantasy Tactics. Has that Octopath style. The 2.5D graphics looked amazing. But the actual game itself, the combat, if it was just based on the combat, I think it probably would be my game of the year, or my second best game of the year. But because it is so bogged down on what ultimately ends up being meaningless story beats and decisions that you never really feel that you quite had a play in, and just takes so much time. One of the nice things, I've been playing some older PS1 RPGs this year as well, especially Vandal Hearts or Vandal Hearts 2, or I've been playing Vanguard Bandits. I actually was going to do that review this week, but Christmas and everything kind of slowed us down, so here we are. I'm doing the top 10 right now. Is that when there's story beats you need to see, it just shows them all sequentially. But in Triangle Strategy, what will happen is you'll go back to the main map, and then you'll see these little things pop up on the map, and then you can click on it, and it might be a 1-minute scene, a 30-second scene, a 2-minute scene. Not having it just sequentially play out, you get the load times that then stop you, then pull you back, stop you, then pull you back. There's a lot of the push-pull, and then because there are only sectioned chapters for fighting, you have to then go into the training areas where you complete, almost like the way that Tactics Ogre did it, where you're doing scrimmages to get extra abilities and extra levels and extra things like that. And it didn't sit right. It didn't sit right. The combat was great. I am so happy with the combat, but the execution of the game overall, I feel like, is what's put it as my number 4 for the year. Now, number 3. Number 3 is the first game other than Undertale that I've actually platinumed, and is my favorite game that I picked up for the PS5 this year. Now, the other game I'm playing and we'll get to that. I originally had thought this was going to be duking it out for my game of the year 1 and 2, but since I beat it a couple of weeks ago, and since it sat with me, I think that some of that shine, much like when I did Shadow of War a few years ago, and I played so much of it that it really elevated itself probably higher than it should have been. I'm putting God of War Ragnarok as my number 3 game of the year. Why is that? Well, chiefly the story, the whole everything is very good, but I also feel like it somewhat betrays what they could have done. Like, a lot of it, you feel like, as Kratos, you're walking through this game constantly getting berated for being who you are and how you need to be better. And at some point, I think it melds the line between what the character is and versus what kind of messaging they're trying to put out as far as the state of the world. And let's face it, it's very much a game that they said they wanted to follow up the 2018 game by just having a blowout, knockdown, drag-out game and do everything in it. And I feel like because they did that, they accelerated things quicker than they had to. And one of the chief things I think they did is that they present Odin from all the characters that are against him as this evil dictator piece of shit, Whereas when you experience Odin in the game, yeah, I get that's part of the point, but he's a very charming, very likable, and also not completely in the wrong. He's just somebody that's willing to utilize the tools in front of him to get his ultimate end goals. But it also is easily justifiable that what he's doing, which is one of the interesting wrinkles they did with Gana, the Valkyrie Queen, where you read one of her notes where she says like, oh, of course the vicious ex-wife, the disgruntled employee, and things of that. So it's kind of like you don't really know where you are at as far as who's the bad guy or who's the good guy. Now then they kind of blow that all up the lid when they have Odin, start killing people out of nowhere, but I feel like that was not necessarily in character for what they had set up. And instead, they're using an end to justify the means, where it's like, see, we told you he was bad. They didn't show you he was bad, but then when the bad things happen, you can then look back in retrospect and know he was being bad. But at the time, I don't think it's as clever as they think they're being. And because of that, I feel like even though it had the same great combat, the same great everything, as far as the first one, the story is so convoluted and bogs it down, in my opinion, that it lowers it because of that. Because the first game, it's simply this. You're on a journey to spread your mother's ashes, or your dead wife's ashes on a mountaintop. And then the world kind of comes to you. In this game, from the offset, Ragnarok is coming. So there's not much of a surprise along the way when it turns out that Odin is actually bad. So that's why I think the fact that they could have stretched it to another game even, or just had it not be Ragnarok and had Ragnarok show up, during the course of the game, that would have been a far more effective reveal than us being there for the journey and expecting the turns. Oh, and expecting, surprise, surprise, that Kratos is supposed to die, because they hinted that at the end of the first game, and then they give that to Atreus as well, but doesn't happen. Anyways, off my soapbox for that. Number 2. So number 2 in any other year would have been my game of the year because it hits off everything I like. It's a really good RPG. It's got that great art style, and it's also a game that's near and dear to my heart because it's the 4th game I ever reviewed on this channel, the Super Famicom version, which is Live Alive, or Live Alive. I still prefer Live Alive. And this little game is so great. It proves that old game design will still work in 2022. You hear that, Square? Please, listen to this, because it was great. It was great. In fact, they not only made it good, they improved on it. And I can't tell you how many times a remake comes out where they change things, they try and update it, they try to modernize it, which Final Fantasy VII Remake is a chief example of that. Versus this game, they literally, because they didn't expect it to do much, they just remade it. But they actually enhanced the ending, which when I played the game through the first time, was probably one of my chief complaints with the game, is that it felt a little unsatisfactory. They really screwed over one of the characters, who is the villain. In this game, they give a redemption arc, they give an ultimate bad guy that fills in for that ending, that completely blows the doors off of the original and makes this the definitive version of the game. Not since Resident Evil Remake on the GameCube have I been so thoroughly impressed with a remake of a game, to the point where, in my opinion, it exceeds the original. Now, that was my opinion back then. Now, I kind of like the original because of the bad voice acting, but at the time, because of the graphics and everything, yeah, that's what it was, and that's how this game feels to me. And if you have a Switch, pick this up. You will not be disappointed. Well, my number 1 game of the year comes as a bit of a surprise. We had a little bit of a rematch as far as where my loyalties were lying. We had another Horizon game, we had a Octopath-style game, we had a Live a Life, and then we had a Souls game, which I'm not even a huge Souls fan. I loved Sekiro, but that was really the first game that hooked me. And I picked up Elden Ring, which I didn't even want to get. It was coming out the week before Triangle Strategy, and I'm like, there's no way I'm picking this up. But the hype train, the hype monster, it begged to be played. And I played this on PS4, and then when I got my PS5, I popped the disc in and got the free PS5 download, and immediately it was a revelation. One of the main reasons why I was so happy with the purchase, because the load times are instantaneous. And just the fact that you go out in the world, and the world is your oyster. You can do anything, and around every corner the world is so dense, there's something to explore, there's something to find. Now, there is a steep learning curve, and it does help you to know what to do when you're going as far as what kind of combat style you like or what kind of build you should be looking at, because it's really not conducive to not doing that, which is probably the biggest drawback that I would have on these style of games. That's one of the reasons why I liked Sekiro so much, is Sekiro made it so that you couldn't get out of the box. You had to play it the way it wanted you to. In this game, you can easily screw yourself, which I did screw myself at the beginning, and I ended up having to grind 9 hours to be able to use this heavy two-hand sword that then allowed me to play the game the right way, which I was watching my boy Rio and Mike do. And he showed me the way, as always. Such a good game. Truly the game of the year. I know there was a hotly contested debate between that and God of War Ragnarok, and like I said during my Game Awards video, my reasoning for Elden Ring was the fact that Elden Ring kind of took everything that the Soulsborne games have been doing in recent years and brought it to a pinnacle, whereas God of War Ragnarok, I felt, was a step back from the 2018 version. Not so much in the combat was better, but as far as the storytelling and the fact that it was just there was no moment like getting the Blades of Chaos, which you couldn't. But even things like getting sucked into Helheim, or the Niflheim maze, or the Valkyrie assaults, they all were so fresh. Like, when I came across that Valkyrie in Niflheim, or the end of Muspelheim, I was shocked, and I was like, oh my god. In Ragnarok, you have these headstones, these gravestones. It just doesn't have the same impact. And then the gravestones have you fighting against 2 enemies, an enemy that summons enemies, 3 enemies at one point. It just wasn't as enjoyable. So ultimately, I felt that God of War Ragnarok was a step back from what made it so good, whereas Elden Ring was a step forward and kind of the pinnacle. That was my same issues with Horizon Forbidden West as well. So anyways, yes, Elden Ring, my game of the year, well earned. Looking forward to 2023. And yeah, looking forward to playing these 2 bad boys, because I almost put this at number 10 without even playing it, just because I already know I'm going to love this game. But yeah, that's what you get for this week, guys. Let me know what your favorite games of the year were. It was so nice getting a hold of you. Take care.